today and forevermore. He is able to take you to a place of abundance. He is able to take you to Rehoboth. In the
Nderi wa kanisa la Christian Foundation Fellowship Kiambu. Usikose.
My trust is in you.
Next on.
Nilikuja nikakuwa inakoma. Nikakaa inakoma karibu mwezi na kama sijisikii. Kaambiwa vile nilipona nilikuwa nalishwanga hivi, nilikuwa nashikiliwanga hivi, huku kote kulikuwa kumepasuka.
I had to accept the vitiligo itself because I sat down and saw my grandparents were really using a lot of resources. Some were just after the money.
Cause we're differently abled, differently.
Next on.
Welcome to the show. This is Big Man Show on KBC Channel 1.
My name is Valentine Mamboi. I'm in class 5. Tumeenda FEMA award, tukashinda award. Ndio hiyo award tulishinda huko FEMA award. Tukaenda Mathare Festival, tukashinda 10K. Na kwa sababu ya siza ya goti kama sio tungeshinda.
I'm going to show you how to make love heart envelopes.
We will be reading from the book Flip Flop Farm Animals.
This weekend on KBC Channel 1.
Nilivyo kuniambia ubuda amepotea na mabaki yetu sio.
Ndugu yako Yusuf na Abdalla ndugu yako Yusuf. Sasa haina haja mgombane. Unaona bwana? Kwa sababu ugomvi huleta hasara.
Yale ya impeachment ya governor. Kabisa ndio hayo. Tayari tushaongea na MCAs. Shida iko wapi bwana? Tayari hivi ninavyokuambia kuna motion ya kumimpeach. Na ndio hivi tunaenda kuishughulikia.
Next on.
I told Maximiliano not to say anything. I didn't want you to know. I didn't want you to worry. I don't know why he did it.
This weekend on KBC Channel 1.
You are not my mother. Neither are you my woman. Sawa sawa.
Yes, Julio umesikia? You are not his mother or his woman, so keep on.
Ati men are supposed to be the head of the family, please.
Chabo.
If these are the leaders of tomorrow, then we actually do.
Hey, come on! This can't be our routine.
I have to tell you something.
Fine, you can tell me when you're seated.
Kinanjui, what have you done?
Ashisia, can you help out here?
Classmates, every Saturday on KBC.
This weekend on KBC Channel 1.
Where do you think you're going right now? The car that you're currently driving belongs to me and to the company you chose to resign from.
And someone got paid very handsomely. And don't you find it strange that my mother's earring hasn't turned up?
Did you sign a prenuptial agreement with Bianca?
What are you trying to imply here?
You went to the house of Guillermo Arredondo? Don't tell me your uncle sent you to investigate.
The year was 2020, the month was March, when President Uhuru Kenyatta outside Harambee House dropped the bombshell that the dreaded COVID-19 virus was roaming in our midst, with the first case reported in Nairobi.
What followed next was a flurry of activities as the country faced the uncertain future. Today, 365 days later, Kenyans can sigh in relief that we managed to beat the corner. But that doesn't mean that it is time to pop up the champagne bottle yet.
Good evening and welcome to a special edition of Channel One Weekend, where we trace the history of COVID-19 in this country. We analyze the situations and cut down the hysteria to bring you the stories that matter to you.
Well, my name is Catherine Achenga, and welcome to the program.
O'Brien Kimani is my name. Welcome to the program as well. First of all, let's have a look at the highlights.
The nationwide curfew is hereby extended for a further containment of 60 days.
The pandemic pain. Government spells out 18 new measures in a bid to clamp down on the third wave of COVID-19 infections.
Today I direct that all forms of political gathering be and are hereby prohibited for a period of 30 days effective midnight on this 12th of March 2021.
Political gatherings suspended. Government bans meetings for 30 days as COVID-19 infection rate remains at double digit. And the tales of COVID-19 survivors. We bring you some of the faces behind the COVID-19 infection statistics 1 year on.
Well, our sign language, sign language interpreter is Lucy Maura. My Twitter handle is at O'Brien Kimani, at Kato Achieng, as well as at KBC Channel One. Those are our Twitter handles. You can follow us and, of course, make your comments. They are welcome. Let's start off with a bulletin with the latest from the House on the Hill. The government has introduced a raft of new stringent measures aimed at battling the third wave of COVID-19 infections. President Uhuru Kenyatta, in his 14th address on COVID-19, spelled out 18 measures in place to contain the spread of the virus. Here are the details of the new measures. Well, here you are. These, as I told you, were the new measures that were outlined today by President Uhuru Kenyatta. From now going forward for the next 30 days, the ban on all political gatherings for the next 30 days takes effect midnight today. Extension of the nationwide curfew for another 6 days, which means that all the political meetings that we have been saying have now been banned and made illegal. And President Kenyatta was very firm on this, urging the Ministry of Interior together with the Kenya Police Service to ensure this ban is enforced. Extension of directive for bars and restaurants to close by 9 p.m. That is the current situation. And limiting number of people attending funerals, stroke weddings to 100. Of course, this is very bad news for anybody who was planning to get married this weekend, because it means that you have to cut down on the number of attendees. The burials to take place within 72 hours of death. Again, this is likely to be very interesting going forward, because you know for sure here in Africa we like to celebrate the deaths of our loved ones with long ceremonies. The public health safety protocols will continue as usual. Worship places to accommodate only 1/3 of the capacity, which means that if your church or mosque or which is the other one, or Tempo, accommodates 100 people. Only 30 are permitted by law. Border health security to be enhanced as well to track any new cases of COVID-19, from penetrating into our country. Those are some of the issues, as well as protocols for public service transport to be revised, and Transport CS James Macharia, together with his health counterpart Mutahi Kagwe, have been directed to ensure that they develop new protocols on transport. Establishment of an intergovernmental committee on COVID-19. You remember very well that the former chair of COG, Wycliffe Oparanya, who happens to be the governor of Kakamega, has already relinquished his position to the governor of Embu, Honorable Martin Wambora. So the committee has been reconstituted and they're expected to start work immediately. Let's go next. Oh yeah, and something else very interesting about this intergovernmental committee is that they're supposed now to start meeting on a weekly basis, whereby they're expected to update the nation on the new measures that are taking place to help the spread, or to help curb the spread of COVID-19 in the country, as well as the new measures being put in place to ensure that the country goes back to normal. Achienga Catherine is my co-host. She's on the other end. Achienga.
Very stringent measures indeed.
Oh yeah.
It means we have to change our lifestyles again.
Absolutely, and the beauty of it is that somehow we have gotten used to these new measures because they have been with us for the last almost 11 months.
Yes, 10 months.
10 months actually. So, which means that somehow this is our new normal, if I'm allowed to say so.
Yeah, it means we can't throw out the masks just yet.
Absolutely.
All right,
Please.
Let's now continue focusing on other measures that were announced by President Uhuru Kenyatta earlier today, and the government has now heeded to rising calls to introduce stiffer measures in the wake of a spike in new COVID-19 infections. Now, President Uhuru Kenyatta says the decision to impose restrictions is guided by a need to preserve the sanctity of life as opposed to salvaging the economy, which can be rebuilt. Nancy Okware takes a look at the implications of the latest directives.
The government has issued new directives in a bid to tame the increase in cases of COVID-19, whose infection rate has risen from 2% in January to 13% in March. President Kenyatta, in his address, said the new measures were aimed at ensuring a drop in new infections, and the changes are a delicate balance to ensure the social-economic landscape is not greatly affected.
Exemption on the application of curfew is hereby granted to essential service providers, factories working on 2 shifts, construction sites. All these are allowed to operate their night shifts.
With some players in the industry having decried the prolonged measures that have hurt businesses, the head of state says that the measures have had a positive impact in protecting the sanctity of life.
The cost of this bold decision to our economy was hefty. Nevertheless, the profit of the swift policy action is immeasurable in terms of the human lives saved.
The new measures reducing the number of people attending funerals, cremations and weddings, and for burials to take place within 72 hours are likely to reawaken concerns over cultural practices and financial capability.
Sio kwa sababu ya kuzuia wenzetu kumon wale ambao wamepoteza, lakini ni kuzuia wengine wasiende matanga, wajipate kwa shida, na hao pia tuwapoteze juu ya wale ambao walienda kuzika.
Reforms in the public service transport sector are also in the offing.
The Cabinet Secretary for Transport, jointly with the Cabinet Secretary for Health, are directed to develop revised protocols for public transport in consultation with all stakeholders in the transport sector.
And to ensure adherence of all guidelines announced, President Kenyatta has directed that an intergovernmental coordination framework be established in all the 47 counties to spearhead implementation of the revised containment measures. Chair of the Council of Governors, Martin Wambora, welcomed the directives urging Kenyans to remain vigilant.
Tukianza na hii mambo ya corona, kwa sababu inaangamiza watu wetu zaidi, tutashirikiana pamoja ndivyo watu wetu wapone na escape hii mambo ya COVID.
Nancy Okware, Channel 1 News.
Now, Kenya has recorded 750 new COVID-19 cases out of 6,264 samples that were tested in the last 24 hours. Now, the total caseload in the country stands at 111,935. The figures represent a 12% infection rate. Now, in the latest figures released by the Ministry of Health, 215 patients have recovered from the disease, 122 from the home-based isolation care, while 93 are from various facilities. 2 more patients have, however, succumbed to the disease, pushing the total number of fatalities to 1,901. Currently, there are 632 patients who are admitted in various health facilities countrywide, while 1,912 patients are on home-based isolation and care. 96 patients are in the intensive care unit. Those are the latest figures by the Ministry of Health regarding the status of COVID-19 infections in the country. And still focusing on the situation in the country, an estimated 560 billion shillings has been wiped out from the Kenya's gross domestic product in 2020 after the government instituted containment measures to curb the spread of COVID-19. Now, President Uhuru Kenyatta has said that the economy is expected to bounce back this year after expanding by 0.6% last year. Let's now take a look at the details.
From the Kenya National Bureau of Statistics indicates the number of people in employment fell to 15.9 million between April and the end of June last year, compared to 17.6 million the previous quarter. The job losses were as a result of COVID-19 scourge that continues to haunt the global economy. President Kenyatta has said the economy is now on a path of recovery, buoyed by bouncing business confidence and the economic rescue plan deployed by the government. Kenyatta says the figures could have been worse were it not for the resilience of the Kenyan economy.
In fact, data the world over indicates that our 0.6% growth rate and loss in GDP was an acceptable economic reality under COVID. If our economy grew by plus 0.6%, the global economy declined.
When the government issued the new COVID-19 guidelines, industry is almost ground to a halt as the health emergencies forced businesses to lay off or furlough workers. President Kenyatta has further said the SME sector continues to improve on the back of improving macroeconomic measures. Last year, the World Bank Group Socio-Economic Impacts of COVID-19 on Kenyan farms reported that only 50% of SMEs are still operating.
Fellow Kenyans, further projections indicate that in spite of the COVID plunge, our economy is likely to bounce back and grow by approximately 7% in the year 2021. If we had not made the bold decisions of 2020, as is projected, our economy would in 2021 have contracted by 15%.
Despite suppressed economic growth, Kenya performed favorably against other regions, with the global economy growing at a rate of negative 3.5%, Euro area at negative 0.2%, and sub-Saharan African economies expanding by negative 2.6%. Alan Naoko, Channel 1 Business.
Now, at the stroke of midnight, we will be marking 1 year since the country reported the first case of COVID-19, and the coast was among the most affected regions by the COVID-19 pandemic. But we want to take a look at where did it all begin for us as a country. Now, the first case of COVID-19 would spark a series of events that would forever redefine the social, economic landscape and limit movement of goods and persons. It was a period of uncertainty, suspicion, and limited information. 1 year later, there is a vaccine, more information, and Kenyans are adjusting to the new normal. Regina Manyara looks back at the last 12 months and the struggles in battling the pandemic, whose impact will be felt for generations to come. Although we'll be getting back to that particular story, but first let's cross back to Mombasa County and take a look at how the COVID situation has affected this particular county. And the coast was among the most affected regions by the confirmation of COVID-19 cases, since the area's economy mainly relies on tourism and travel. As Kenya marks 1 year since the first case of COVID-19 was confirmed, the tourism industry players and the business community at the coast are optimistic that they shall rise again from the ashes of 2020. And Boro reflects on the impact of COVID-19 over the last 1 year in the coast region.
These were the scenes at the Jomo Kenyatta Public Beach when the county government of Mombasa closed it due to rising cases of COVID-19. Running battles were witnessed as the traders tried to salvage what they could. Immediately, police took vigil to ensure no one sneaks to the beach that was deserted for months. The hotel industry began feeling the heat as countries imposed lockdowns, barring citizens from traveling. Gradually, hotels began downsizing their capacity and temporarily shutting down since they had no clients. This was worsened by an announcement by President Uhuru Kenyatta restricting movement into and out of Mombasa, Kwale, Kilifi and Nairobi via road, sea or air in efforts to contain the spread of coronavirus. Some hoteliers utilized that period to renovate their facilities.
I think all the hotels closed down for up to 6-7 months. Up to now, some are not open. The hotels closed down. The economy was shuttered. For the hotels, we lost billions of shillings. If I was to put 120, 130 billion to now, budgets were thrown out of the window. I'm the general manager of Pride Inn Flamingo. We did a lot of work during this period. We upgraded. We made a fantastic pool, the biggest one in East and Central Africa as one pool. We did our conference rooms, we did training, but then everybody then had to go home. But hotels were helping their staff. They said at least once a month, let us engage, let us see how our staff are doing.
Mackinnon Market, popularly known as Markiti, was among the business premises that was closed down after imposition of a lockdown in the Old Town area of Mombasa. The Old Town was renovated for the first time since it was built in the 1970s.
Wakati ulipotangazwa lockdown, sisi tulipata afueni kama wafanyaji biashara. Soko letu likarekebishwa na likaletwa hali ya kimataifa. Hivi soko nalivyoliona sasa hii, tuna parking, tuna choo, ndani kuko hali nzuri ya kimandhari, space ya ndani, hatuna takataka sasa hii. Kwa hivyo pia tulipata afueni katika upande wa kaunti kuturekebishia soko letu la Mackinnon Market.
It's 1 year down the road and business has really not stabilized at the market, but they remain optimistic about the future.
Watu wengi wakati wa lockdown, baadhi ya wanunuzi wengi waliangukia sehemu za Kongowea na wengine wakabakia sehemu za Majengo. Kwa hivyo tuwaomba wanunuzi waliokuwa wanakuja Mackinnon Market waje kama vile walivyokuwa wakija zamani. Soko liko safi, tunasema tena, soko lina space nzuri, parking, kuna choo hapa ambao mnunuzi ana huduma yote ambao anaweza hudumiwa na wafanyaji biashara wa Mackinnon Market.
Tourism industry players are optimistic that initiatives by the government, such as the stimulus program and the partnerships between airlines and hotels, will help lift businesses.
Kenya Airways has done a fantastic deal. It is offered, it's reduced their flights. Jumbo Airlines has introduced new areas from which they are flying. You know, now you can come from Eldoret, you can go to Diani, you can go to Malindi. So everybody has reacted to ensure that we keep Kenya moving. There's been a lot of teams going out and negotiating rates. Gone are the days where hotels would put sort of cast a rate in stone and say, take it or leave it. Now it is discussed, what do you have? Let's make it personal. We offer this. And somebody will come and say, no, I want this and I want this. And this is what I can afford. So people are negotiating. And I think that's the best thing for this country. People are coming together. COVID has brought us together.
The business community and residents of the coast region are optimistic of recovery of tourism, their main economic activity. From Mombasa County, I am Ann Boro.
Now, even before the COVID-19 scourge struck Kenya, the economy was facing the uncertain future. The pandemic was rolling Kenya's main trading partners in China and the United States, leading to crippling lockdowns. When Kenya confirmed its first case of COVID-19, the economy went into a panic mode, forcing policymakers to relook at various economic growth models. Now, the government outlined various interventions to mollify the impact of the disease on Kenyans. 1 year on, Betty Kiptum tracks the economic journey from the COVID-19 bust to post-pandemic booms.
Weeks before Kenya confirmed the first case of coronavirus, the economy was already feeling the impact of the virus. Import of some key industrial raw materials and some items had already started drying up as countries closed their borders and locked down certain regions in efforts to contain the spread of virus or reduce imported infections. Kenya confirmed the first case of coronavirus on 13th of March. This impacted international trade immediately, with the Kenya National Bureau of Statistics reporting a drop in volume of trade from 202.3 billion shillings in March of 2020 to 163 billion in April 2020. Exports dipped from 64.5 billion shillings in March 2020 to 43.2 billion in April 2020, while the value of imports decreased from 138 billion in March 2020 to 120 billion in April. Kenya's manufacturing sector found itself at a crossroad. Demand for COVID-related protective equipment and medical supplies skyrocketed. Many manufacturers were forced to reconfigure their operations to stay afloat.
As a ministry, and we call upon the SME sector to take advantage of this opportunity and to turn around this pandemic to an opportunity to grow our industry in the country.
Kwa hivi sasa kazi si mbaya sana. Wananchi wanaitikia vitu za Kenya, wanaanza kuona manufaa ya kujishonea badala ya kuimport vitu kutoka nje.
This is being produced right here in Kenya, and therefore for all of us, boda riders, boda passengers, matatu passengers, and all of us going into shops, we need to wear our masks outside. And these are available right here in Kenya. We are satisfied that these companies, when called upon, will be able to supply. I understand from the proprietor here that this factory alone is able to assemble 200 beds.
3 weeks after confirmation of the first case in Kenya, more positive cases were recorded, forcing the government to impose a movements ban on the counties of Nairobi, Mombasa, Kilifi, and Kwale.
There shall be cessation of all movement by road, rail, or air in and out of A, the Nairobi metropolitan area, and B, the counties of Kilifi, Kwale, and Mombasa.
This nearly brought tourism, aviation, and transport to their knees. The restricted travels, coupled with a countrywide curfew, led to a major drop in outputs. Hotels, tour firms, and airlines were among the first to announce job cuts and salary reductions that would later become a norm for businesses in other sectors. KNBS data shows unemployment rates doubled to 10.4% in the second quarter, compared to 5.2% in the first quarter due to the COVID-19 pandemic. 3 days after the first case confirmation, the central bank announced the removal of charges on mobile money transfer for amounts of up to 1,000 shillings and waiver of charges on bank to mobile phone transactions from 16th of March in efforts to encourage Kenyans to embrace cashless transactions in efforts to contain the spread of coronavirus.
In order to avoid the risk of transmission through physical handling of money, We encourage the use of cashless transactions, such as mobile money, M-Pesa and otherwise.
Transfer of cash of up to 1,000 shillings would remain zero-rated until the end of 2020. This affected transactions worth 1.76 trillion shillings by end of September, according to CBK figures. These haunted telcos, with Safaricom reporting the first reduction in profit since 2011, blaming it on the scrapping of charges on M-Pesa transfers. What followed next was a streak of listed companies issuing profit warnings. In the 9 months to September last year, top banks including KCB, Equity, Cooperative, ABSA, Stanbic, DTB and Stanchart saw a 22.6 billion shilling decline in profitability. Commercial lenders have projected a steep drop in their full-year net profits for 2020 on account of COVID-induced economic disruptions. Lenders raised their loan loss provision to reflect the economic fallout facing individuals and firms.
As a matter of fact, banks have been doing what they needed to do, meaning they needed to be conservative and make provisions for their loans.
In addition, the government in April introduced favorable tax measures to help cushion Kenyans against the adverse effects of coronavirus. Among the measures were a reduction of VAT from 16% to 14%, no income tax for those earning up to 24,000 shillings monthly, and suspension of the highest tax band of 30%. For businesses, turnover tax for small businesses was also reduced from 3% to 1%, while corporate tax was slashed from 30% to 25%.
That the National Treasury considers retaining the income tax rates pay as you earn at 25% until the 1st of January 2021. That to continue cushioning our micro, small and medium-sized enterprises, the National Treasury considers maintaining the reduction of the current turnover tax from 3% to 1% for all micro, small and medium-sized enterprises.
However, this came at a cost. The Kenya Revenue Authority missed its tax collection target by 186.3 billion shillings between March and November. KRA collected 1.1 trillion shillings against a target of 1.28 trillion shillings in the 8 months to November. The start of 2021 opened a new chapter for Kenya's economy. Tax measures introduced to cushion Kenyans from the impact of COVID-19 were scrapped. This bolstered tax collection, with Kenya Revenue Authority reporting a positive start to the year. The taxman surpassed its January target of 138 billion shillings by 3.53 billion shillings to collect 142 billion shillings, which is a 6.7% growth over the same period last year. In December last year, the taxman brought home more than 166 billion shillings in taxes, beating the 164 billion shillings target. International trade opened up, with the Customs and Border Control Department collecting 55 billion shillings, a 9.7% growth, and a revenue surplus of 6 billion shillings. Business performance was resuscitated, with corporation tax levied on resident companies recording a revenue collection growth of 44.4%. This was a performance rate of 120% against the target, an improvement from December 2020 performance, which stood at 93.5%. Despite the economic and social chaos caused by coronavirus, the economy remained resilient, with Treasury estimating gross domestic product increased 0.6% in 2020. Banking on the vaccination measures and the loosening of business restrictions, the National Treasury projects the economy will expand by 6.4% in 2021. Betty Kiptum, Channel 1 Business.
Of course, Betty Kiptum giving you a breakdown of the economy as a result of COVID-19. Nothing much to report about. The economy just growing at a mere 0.6%, but it's expected given that we were facing a pandemic. So we want to take our first break. But O'Brien, if you just look at, those numbers with the president today saying that we expect the economy to grow with 7% this year, what really do you make of what we...
Well, I mean, if you were to look at the global figures, for the year 2020, actually, the most interesting thing is that the Kenyan economy outpaced the global economy, because when you look at how the global economy expanded, actually it was a contraction by about 4.9%, and this was led by advanced economies. And when I'm talking about advanced economies, I'm talking about countries like the United States, China, India, and so much. I mean, India is not included there, but United States, UK, Netherlands, and so much. But when you look at the developing economies where Kenya is a member, you realize that, you know, the reduction in terms of growth was a little bit mild because in 2020, there was a contraction of negative 3.0%. Now, that is bad enough because it means that the total wealth of developing economies, you know, contracted by a whole 3%. Now, that is more than 10 trillion US dollars. That's quite significant. But when you look at Kenya, you know, one would say that, we somehow managed to dodge the recession bullet because it's a rate of 0.6%. One would say that this was actually a big boost.
So that's a positive for us.
Oh yeah, one can say that. And the beauty about the Kenyan economy, one thing that we have never understood is the Kenyan economy is very resilient in the face of many turmoils, because in the past we have faced many tragedies, you know, from the post-election violence in 2019 to many other things. But when you look at how we performed in 2020, one can say that it was a triumph, it was a big plus. And the toppings on the cookie this time around will be in the year 2021, actually the year that we are in, where you expect the economy, according to National Treasury projections, to grow by more than 6% this year. I know you have a question that you want to ask our people.
Yes, indeed. I have a question because, I mean, for a whole year we've been talking about COVID-19. We've had lots of stories, and tonight we just want to find out from you who is watching us at home or on Facebook, Twitter, or the YouTube. What is your unique COVID-19 story? The question, it should be coming up on your screen shortly. What is your unique COVID-19 story? We would like to hear from you. What really is your unique COVID-19 story? For the past 12 months, a lot has been said, but we're looking for that special story, that unique story, that story that changed your life, that story that made you think differently. And we'd like you to share your thoughts with us on Facebook. You can talk to us on KBC Channel 1 TV. You can also engage us on our Twitter handle at KBC Channel 1, my Twitter handle at Kato Achenga, and of course for O'Brien at O'Brien Kimani. We want to hear those unique stories that you have right here on Channel 1 News Hour. But for now, let's take a quick break. But when we come back, O'Brien Kimani, of course, will be crunching some of the numbers across the globe. And before actually we go for the break, you know, one of the stories that I would expect, you know, is how Kenyan companies managed to up their games. They reconfigured their production systems and they went into face mask production. They went into, what do you call this chemical that we use for, you know, sanitizers. And so those are some of the interesting stories, including the innovation by Kenyatta University that somehow went a long way in alleviating the suffering of patients in our hospitals. Those are some of the interesting stories and unique stories that we expect to hear from you. Well-deserved break is coming up next.
Fanya hivi, wewe teremuka tu chini. Hata watu wanangojea, unasema unione. Si ninakuona ndio huyu kucha. Kucha ninakuona.
Yoi.
Nimekuita mara ngapi Kate? This is the Nissan Note.
Hii ndio motoka.
Not that this is the Nissan Note we are giving out.
Na ni rahisi sana kuwekelea bid. Unaenda kwenye lipa na M-Pesa. Unaweka paybill number 4032353. Kisha unakelea account number ya Nissan Note ni Note, N-O-T-E. Namba ambayo unapenda, labda unapenda 100, labda unapenda 200, wekelea Note 100, Note 200. Alafu tutakuitisha shilingi 40 peke yake, 40 bob only. Weka pin yako, utakuwa umekelea bid ya hii Nissan Note. Inakungoja wewe mahali popote ulipo. Mimi na mtumishi tutakupea.
Tumesema wananchi wapewe maji bure, hata ndururu hakuna kulipa.
Wakati COVID iliingia ilikuwa tunanunua maji 20 bob.
Sometimes unapata unataka kupika, maji haiko.
Tunachota maji hapa karibu, atulipii.
Hii tank ina uwezo ya kuzabaza maji up to 1 kilometer radius bila kutumia nguvu ya pampu ingine kielekea kwa wananchi.
Maji tumeweza kusambaza kwa mashule, mahospitali, vijiji.
Now with 193 boreholes, most of the disadvantaged and informal settlements have sufficient water.
This weekend on KBC.
Wiki hii kwenye Mkulima tutakita mizizi katika shamba la Kidhekani, tujionee uzuri wa teknolojia katika kilimo.
Kitu cha kwanza teknolojia imetusaidia ni maji, pumping. Mimi kama mkulima hii imenisaidia because venye kwa nasema kama nikipanda maharagwe naweza tayarisha shamba mapema, kwa sababu naweza jua ni tarehe ngapi hivi nitapata mvua. Na pia wakati mwingine pia kupanga mavuno, kwa sababu vitu zingine zikinyeshewa kwa shamba inakuwa si vizuri.
Basi ungana nasi Jumapili saa 9:30 hapa KBC Channel 1 kwa mseto kamili wa kilimo.
Welcome back. You're watching this special coverage of COVID-19. Remember, on a day like tomorrow in the year 2020, Kenya reported its first case of COVID-19. How has the journey been? I want to feed you now with data and statistics. Don't worry, I know sometimes they get crunchy, but I'll help you to break them down. I want you to have a look at this map of Kenya here. There's some very interesting statistics about Kenya. The problem with this system is that it gets funny at times, but let's see. You see, up to date, the number of deaths reported in this country stands at 1,899 or 1,899. Well, the recoveries, this is the unsung story, beautiful story of this whole situation, whereby the recoveries were 87,994, whereas the cases stands at 111,000. Of course, not looking pretty good up there. I want you to give you some very interesting data here. Look, let's try to go here. The first case of COVID-19 was somehow reported. Look at this. Let's see. There you are. And technology playing poker with me right now. But I wanted to show you this map here when Kenya reported, anyway, forget about it. When Kenya reported its first case of COVID-19. And the journey has not been easy because since the first case was reported in March 13th, the year 2020, the journey has been painful to some extent. And of course, new discoveries have been made because, let's try it for yeah, there you are. Okay, there you are. Let's first of all pick the case of July 2020, 29th, 2020. As you can see, there were 19,000 cases, 125. And of course, this figure has kept on, growing because when you look at the linear trajectory, it has been on what we call an upward trajectory. Because in October, the cases were 39,427. And I want us to go to when we clicked the 100,000 milestone. That was not until this year. Let's see. Oh, yeah. And the first time that we clicked or we crossed the dreaded 100,000 milestone was sometimes in January this year, actually January 25th, when the cases stood at 100,052. That's how we managed to get to where we are. And up to now, as you can see, the cases, have been rising. And on the March of this year, actually March 5th, the numbers stood at 729. How do we fare compared to other major economies in the world? Look at the United States. I mean, it has for the longest time held the position of the country with the highest fatalities and the highest positive cases. Because as you can see, the United States here with 29 million, actually this would, if you were to round it off, it would be 30 million cases. And the number of deaths, actually, this has been not been very, very good for the United States at 543,000 deaths. And if I can take you back to sometimes in April last year when their top epidemiologist, Anthony Fauci, doctor, he had actually projected that if the United States was not going to do it or to up its game, this number was actually likely to get to go beyond here. And we can actually see somehow his projection is coming to pass, because these are the numbers in the United States of America. Something interesting, also interesting. Let me try to see whether I can get the. There you are. I can't. Let's go to another country that the world has been looking keenly at, and this would be. Oh dear. Let's see. Let's try to get it right. Here you are. Here you are. There you are. Let's go to India. India. You see, India. One of the baffling things is how, the population of India currently stands at more than 3 billion people. And the number of infections are 11,333,000. And of course, the deaths are at 158,483. Those are the deaths in India. The world is still trying to come to terms with how this has been possible in India, in a country with more than 3 billion people, where poverty line is very, or the poverty levels are very, very high. That is the situation here. We'll continue to help you understand these figures, of course. But Catherine Chienga, what do you make of these numbers?
Continuing to rise, shocking. That means we just need to continue observing the COVID-19 safety measures, despite the vaccine coming.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And we have seen, the world has been very aggressive, in terms of inoculating people. And currently, there are more than 400 million people in the world who have been injected with this vaccine. We are yet to know how this is likely to pan out, in the long term. Mm-hmm. That is actually one area that experts are keenly studying. Here in Kenya, of course, we know that we have managed to receive a number of vaccines. One arrived yesterday of about 100,000 vaccines
yes.
from India.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right, I know we've been talking about statistics, so I just want us to put faces behind these numbers, and it's time for us to focus on some of the survivors of COVID-19 and the number of persons who have recovered from COVID-19, as at this morning stood at 87,994. Now, to policymakers, these are statistics that could guide policy, but for those who have been infected and live to tell the story, the figures are more than just statistics. Our reporter Sarafina Ruby puts a face behind the statistics and tells the story of COVID-19 from the eyes of survivors.
2 months after patient zero came forward to publicly state she was infected by COVID-19, there was little information how the disease behaves in the human body. Stigma, suspicion, paranoia were all feelings those infected with the virus had to endure. The government spokesperson, Colonel retired Sarah Suguna, was among some of the prominent persons to come out and announce they had contracted the disease. Journalist Wanjohi Githai, also considered a frontline worker, would also be infected and battle for his life in the ICU. They recount their experience.
I had a very, kind of very sensitive feeling at the top of my head, at the top of the head here. And when I touch it hard, then you don't feel anything. But when I touch it, very light like this, then it was very, very sensitive, almost painful. So previously I've had, of course, a bit of high blood pressure, but nothing to be worried about. But on this occasion, the pressure had actually hit the roof, so I had to be admitted.
And it was much later that this friend of mine was telling me that I was dozing off, you know. I could feel fatigue, but I thought it's the usual thing. But in the evening, I went home early. I normally sleep past 11, but that day I found myself in bed at 9.
The virus behaves differently depending on its host's body, and the severity varies based on immunity, and hence their stories and experiences were as different as day from night.
So when I went to the hospital, I was there for 29 days, of which 28 of them I was on oxygen.
Remember, the stigma for COVID was very high that time. It took hours to admit me. I arrived at 4 p.m., about 5 p.m. I could not leave the car. Can you imagine what I was going through? Only for doctors to tell me some days later that if I had stayed another 12 hours, things would have gone either way.
Their post-COVID experiences were also different.
I can walk 2-3 staircases without stopping to catch my breath. Regarding the sense of taste that came back after about a month, now the sense of smell has taken a bit of time. So even now, about 7 months later, I'm still only able to smell very strong smell.
No, I became more alert on where I'm going now. I don't go to enclosed spaces.
What about their relationship at office with colleagues?
So at no one time, even when I recovered and went back to the office, was I isolated. They did understand that I had tested negative for me to go back to the office, and they were all in support, providing that ecosystem to allow me to continue recovering.
No, they were supportive. You know, at that time, most people had, the office had told us we'd be working from home. So in fact, I did not get it from office. So even when I went back, many of my colleagues were still working from home.
But they were not in this journey alone. Different people had different suggestions on how they could ease the symptoms. Some even prescribing concoctions.
Yes, I do take ginger, lemon, but I take them as a secondary, maybe immune booster, but not before going to hospital. So what I would advise, because I know there are countries that are insisting on, ginger, taking a limao, lemon, but those cannot be able to get COVID away.
Months after their battle with the disease, a vaccine is now available. Will they take the vaccine?
It is not the only measure, but neither is it the silver bullet. When you get the vaccine, it does not stop you from being infected. It only stops the severity of infection.
For Channel 1 News, I'm Sarafina Robi.
Well, those are just some of the tales of those who have lived to tell the story, having been infected by COVID-19. So we want to trace back the journey to where it all began for us as a people. Now, the first case of COVID-19 in the country would spark a series of events that would forever redefine the social economic landscape and limit movement of goods and persons. It was a period of uncertainty, suspicion, and limited information. 1 year later, there is a vaccine, more information, and Kenyans are adjusting to the new normal. Now, Regina Manyara looks back at the last 12 months and the struggles in battling the pandemic, whose impact will be felt for generations to come.
I want to inform you that the Ministry of Health has confirmed the first coronavirus case in Kenya.
Anxiety gripped the country following the announcement of the first case of COVID-19, prompting the government to immediately put a raft of measures aimed at containing the spread of the virus, measures that included the closure of learning institutions.
We have suspended learning in all our education institutions with immediate effect. Consequently, and to facilitate a phased approach, primary and secondary day schools are to suspend operations from tomorrow. For those in boarding schools, the school administration is to ensure that students are home by Wednesday, the 18th March 2020, while universities and tertiary institutions are to close by Friday, 20th March 2020.
That led to the disruption of the curriculum, and you realize now it will take us like 2-3 years to normalize and recover from that loss.
The government then rolled out virtual learning to make up for the lost academic ground. The implementation of virtual learning would, however, come with its own share of challenges as it widened the learning gap, as some learners were left out owing to the lack of requisite resources.
Studies that we've seen indicate that not more than 20% of the children population in Kenya could have access to that. And I think that as a country, that should be able to throw us back to reflect over where we missed the step to be able to equip our schools for online learning. Again, the other thing that we look at is the economic ability of parents to sustain such programs. If you make $1 a day or maybe $2 a day, and you have to make a choice between buying bundles to be able to facilitate learning of your children and buying unga or buying a necessity like food, most parents would go for food.
Many public schools also struggle to stay afloat during the long school closure, opting to either lay off or send their staff on unpaid leave, leaving many teachers struggling to make ends meet.
And most of them went for a whole year without a single pay. And you had cases of even some teachers committing suicide as a result of the frustrations. They were not able to meet their obligations or make ends meet. So I think in future we need to, one, get a way in which we can establish a fund, an emergency fund for education. Private sector could be able to access it, could be accessed as a loan, could be accessed as a grant, but if it is a loan, it has to be a soft loan.
Months into the closure, there was a spike in the vices such as child abuse and sexual exploitation. In June 2020, a survey conducted by the Kenya Health Information System found out that 3,964 girls under the age of 19 in Machakos County were impregnated in 5 months.
It means that at least our schools have a special place that we need to advance, that they are the safest zones that our children can have, and teachers play a very serious role. Apart from teaching, they do parenting.
The government, in consultation with stakeholders, arrived at a decision to commence a phased resumption of in-person learning in strict compliance with COVID-19 safety protocols. On Tuesday, the 7th of July 2020, Education Cabinet Secretary Professor George Magoha announced the phased reopening of universities. A month later, the Ministry of Education announced the resumption of learning for Grade 4, Class 8 and Form 4 learners. On January 4th, 2021, full in-person learning finally resumed. To curb the spread of COVID-19 in schools, wearing of face masks became mandatory, social distancing protocols were enforced, schools were directed to conduct mandatory temperature checks, provide hand-washing points and sanitizers, as well as restrict movement in and out of institutions. Some schools, however, struggled to meet protocols such as social distancing.
I want to plead with our gallant teachers to ensure that they become innovative. For example, in this school, you can see in between the trees, if the weather is as good as it is now, nothing stops the head teacher, who is an excellent teacher, from having classes outside there, in addition to others being inside the room.
When Professor Magoha proposed that we can use trees have been used all along, but we cannot be able to use them to replace classrooms. We teachers creatively use spaces in the schools for different activities at different times. And we can't tell them now we stop building classrooms. What you are expecting that in addition to the pilot desk program, the national desk program, which was not also inadequate, we would have invested heavily in expansion of classrooms, expansion of dormitories, expansion of latrines or toilets, and expansions of other facilities like laboratories.
To help schools meet the requirement on social distancing, the government embarked on a project to equip them with desks and chairs.
As far as the funding from the government of the Republic of Kenya is concerned, the money is 19 billion shillings. As soon as that figure is reached, it shall be wired to schools, hopefully by Monday.
The government further directed all school heads and local leaders to ensure all learners report back to school, including teen mothers.
The minister has been encouraging the girls who might have, along the way, got into early motherhood to go back. But without social support, this may not be feasible.
Since the resumption of learning in January, the government has affirmed that it has moved to re-fence the directives on infrastructural development, as well as the strict adherence of COVID-19 safety protocols in schools. However, the elephant in the room remains the sustainability of such programs. Reporting for Channel 1 News, I am Safin Aching Ouma.
Indeed, that is the story on the impact of COVID-19 on the education sector, and not the story that I had indicated earlier regarding the status of COVID-19 and where the journey began. Well, we'll be looking at that story a little bit later on. But let's now look at some of the effects that have arisen out of COVID-19 and the ferry services in the coastal region would present the biggest headache to the government following the pandemic, owing to the high number of commuters using the facility on a daily basis. Now, the ferry channel, which ferries over 300,000 commuters daily, was identified as a potential super spreader of the virus. In an attempt to reduce transmission, the government formulated a multi-agency team that included Kenya Defence Forces soldiers to restructure operations at the ferry. Michael Mwandiga with details of the austerity measures that were put in place.
This is the Likoni Channel. It is often a sea of humanity as hundreds of thousands cross the Indian Ocean waters to connect from the north and the southern coast. The onset of the pandemic will present a headache on how to control the numbers and ensure social distance to minimize contact and reduce the spread of the virus. The government will swing into action and establish a multi-agency team to formulate a practical solution to reduce transmission.
Wale ambao wanabeba abiria, tunahakikisha kwamba pia wao wanabeba wale abiria ambao wanafaa. Kuna ukiukaji wa hapa na pale, lakini polisi wanawakamata, na ndio unakuta kidogo tumeweza kudhibiti hali yetu ya COVID-19, na tunatarajia kwamba wananchi wataendelea kuzingatia hayo maagizo ili idadi ya wale watu wanaambukizwa iweze kuteremka zaidi.
They will begin by mounting hand washing points, mandatory wearing of face masks while on the ferry, and increase the number of times the ferry is operating.
Ferry, kwa wale watu wa Kwale ambao wanapita kwa ferry kila wakati, unaona kidogo kuna ile kuheshimu zile protocols ambazo serikali imeagiza. Wale wanaopanda ferry wanapanda ferry ambayo haina magari. Wale wanapanda ferry kwa magari yao wanabaki wao tu bila watu.
Coast Regional Coordinator John Elungata, who led the multi-agency team implementing the government directives, said there was no room for complacency in the fight against COVID-19.
Authorities zetu za kiafya bado zinaangalia wale wanaokuja kutoka nje, wanapimwa. Wale wanaotoka pia wanaenda na certificate zao. Sisi ambao tuko ndani ya nchi katika kaunti zetu zote 6 tunafanya operations za kila siku kuhakikisha kwamba ile curfew inazingatiwa.
Elungata says they will remain vigilant despite the logistical nightmare before a working formula was arrived at. He said the new Likoni floating bridge for the exclusive use of pedestrians has helped ease pressure at the Likoni crossing channel.
Ile inatumika kila asubuhi na kila jioni kwa masaa mawili kila pande, na hiyo pia imetuwezesha kuwavusha watu karibu 20,000 kuelekea 27 kila siku na kupunguza ile idadi ama ule msongamano uliokuwa katika feri yetu. Kwa hivyo nafikiri hiyo mikakati ambayo serikali imeweka imetusaidia sana kujiepusha na hili janga kwa ukubwa ama kwa idadi kubwa.
The new measures put in place bore fruits as the spread of the deadly disease was contained at the channel. The government is still urging the public to abide by the health COVID-19 protocols to flatten the curve. Reporting for Channel 1 News from Mombasa County, I'm Michael Mondiga.
Now, the last 12 months have seen President Uhuru Kenyatta brief the nation consistently on the measures in place to fight the global pandemic. Cumulatively, the president has addressed the nation 14 times on the steps by government to contain the spread and ensure the health systems are ready to cater for COVID-19 cases in the case of a surge of infections. Beatrice Gatonye highlights some of the key directives by the president in the past 12 months.
That effective Friday, 27th March 2020, there will be a daily curfew from 7 p.m. to 5 a.m. in the morning. That the National Treasury moves to Parliament to offer the following immediate reliefs: an increased disposable income to the people of Kenya through a 100% tax relief for persons earning a gross monthly income of up to Kenya shillings 24,000. The cessation of movement within the Nairobi metropolitan area shall be for an initial containment period of 21 days with effect from 7 p.m. Monday, the 6th of April, 2020. The cessation of movement within the counties of Kilifi, Kwale, and Mombasa shall be for an initial containment period of 21 days with effect from 7 p.m. on Wednesday, the 8th of April, 2020.
Very well, as we continue to give you some coverage of how the COVID-19 has evolved into this country. Well, let's move on where 12 months after the pandemic hit the country, donning of face masks in public spaces, hand washing, frequent sanitizing and social distancing is now considered basic. However, the implications to the drastic change of life has presented new realities such as an increase in gender-based violence, teen pregnancies and mental health ailments. Nancy Okware takes a closer look at how the pandemic is not just a health issue, but also a social concern that is worrying a psychologist as Kenyans exhibit signs of fatigue.
A majority of Kenyans held on to the hope that the COVID-19 restrictions would quickly pass and they could resume their routine and mingle freely. 1 year later, there has been no significant change. It would appear a majority of Kenyans are experiencing fatigue from constant donning of face masks in public places. They are also jittery on the directive to avoid crowding and limiting the number of people attending social gatherings. Frequent temperature checks before entering any establishment, hand washing or sanitizing are part of the directives that Kenyans have to contend with. If found to have a high temperature, the management has the reservation to deny one entry. The dusk to dawn curfew has also increased the frustration as night travel and the nightlife is curtailed, with families expected to be home earlier. Hundreds of thousands have been rendered jobless, while those who manage to stay in employment have to adjust to remote work or working in shifts to minimize crowding. Physical meetings have been reduced and virtual meetings embraced. It is this drastic change in life with no end in sight that psychologists say is taking a toll on Kenyans' mental wellness.
When people were removed from their normal activities of daily life, going to work, going to school, going shopping, going out to exercise, when we were disrupted, all of us in different ways by the virus, the levels of stress at the national level went extremely high.
According to the Ministry of Health, following the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic, there was an increase in the number of domestic violence cases reported. This has been attributed to families forced to spend more time indoors and job losses that have strained the family unit.
The violence that took place between individuals at home and at work and other places, I think was a direct result of the disruption that was experienced from the little babies who were at home to the old grandparents who could not be visited by their children because that was the instruction from the police. Not visiting your parents was the act of loving them, which is a total contradiction. Not burying your loved ones, and not going to church was an act of worship.
With the number of Kenyans already appearing to have lowered their guard at a time when the country is battling the third wave of infections, the government is cautioning against fatigue in adhering to these measures.
It is at this time, when we feel the way we feel, that we can let our guard down, adopt a don't care attitude, that then we will be hit hardest.
So let's keep observing them, because there is nothing as important as health. You cannot do much when you are actually, if your health is compromised. You can't. Yes. And COVID actually compromises somebody's, a quality of life.
Some of the interventions the government has put in place to improve the mental health of Kenyans during these difficult times include establishment of a toll-free number where Kenyans can call in for counseling services. As it is, the vaccine is now in the country and there is hope of quickly developing herd immunity. But in the meantime, Kenyans have to exercise patience and adopt to the new way of life to keep safe and survive the pandemic. Nancy Okware, Channel 1 News.
Definitely the COVID-19 pandemic taking a toll on our social life as well. Well, the pandemic has had an adverse effect on the entertainment business, literally putting a stop to nightlife. Bar and liquor outlets are the worst affected owing to the dusk to dawn curfew. Entertainment spots where children often go to play, movie theatres, sports facilities have all borne the brunt. Our reporter Timothy Kipnuzu looks at the struggles facing the entertainment industry and how the majority of them are struggling to stay afloat.
The entertainment industry continues to suffer the aftershocks of the pandemic, with the industry yet to reopen a year after the COVID-19 outbreak in the country. Meet Joel Okundi, the manager of Once Busy nightclub in Kisumu. He says the business recorded its worst year in 2020 and made major losses.
Before the business, siwezi complain, ilikuwa sawa. Tulikuwa tunajaribu, it can sustain. Tulikuwa na workers like around 82. But right now, after being affected na corona, it made to hit sana.
The dusk to dawn curfew that remains enforced did not help matters. He says the partial reopening of bars, which are required to close at 9 p.m., has not had a significant impact.
There's no way you can open the country or you can go back to normal kama the percentage is more than 5%, of which according to me, I can see ni ngumu, even though niko na hiyo hopes.
He says he was forced to lay off employees and is struggling to keep the doors open.
So it may affect this sector whereby unapata so many people wamesuffer. Like me right now, ilibidi ni cut some of my workers.
It is the same script for musicians and comedians who often survive through live stage performances and invites to events such as weddings, corporate meetings, and parties. Disc jockeys, to stay relevant and earn an income, shifted their business to social media. Renowned Kenyan artists such as Sauti Sol will also go ahead and launch a new album on social media. DJ Sid, who works at a club in Nairobi, reveals that they have been receiving fewer customers coming to the club for merrymaking, which impacts negatively on his earnings.
We've had challenges since we reopened. That's November last year, and we're trying hard to keep our customers and provide them the services they need, but it's still challenging because the upbringing is not like it used to be before, and they can't have the pleasure they need because of the limited curfew time.
At the same time, Steve K, a celebrated musician who sings in the Luhya dialect and performs at one of the clubs in Nairobi, paints the struggles he has undergone since COVID-19 protocols were initiated.
Janga la corona limetuaffect sana, hatuwezi kufikia mashabiki wengi kwa sababu ya corona, masharti yenye mewekwa na gava, na pia mashabiki wengine wanaogopa kuja kwa klabu, unacheki. So inakuwa ni ngumu sana, watu wengine inabidi waanze kutoka saa 1 jioni kwa sababu wanaogopa curfew. So limetuaffect sisi kama wasanii. Kama serikali ingepata nafasi tu ya kutusaidia sisi kama wanamuziki, waondoe tu curfew, waweke masharti yote sawa sawa, social distance, lakini watoe curfew, sisi kama wasanii tutakuwa tumepona.
He says his income reduced by 50%, making it difficult to pay his crew.
Band iko na watu kama 11 ambao wako kwa band. Saa ingine tukiwa Nairobi hapa tunaemploy watu kama watu 15 kwa band yangu.
Have established the framework I asked them to do in January to ensure full transparency for artists' earnings.
The government, in attempting to assist those in the industry, launched a fund and offered 10,000 shillings for musicians and those in the sports industry to survive. Kay says this is not enough and a more sustainable approach should be formulated. Movie theaters have remained shut, children playground and sport facilities deserted. The arrival of a vaccine has offered a ray of hope with those in the entertainment industry, hoping for a shift in operations to restore their fortunes. Timothy Kipnusu for Channel 1 News.
Definitely the entertainment industry, one of the hardest hit. Remember, you're watching this COVID special live from Broadcasting House. And remember, our question tonight is, what is your unique COVID-19 story? Basically, what we'll be asking you is, what has been your silver lining in this dark cloud? That's the question we are asking you. From reinventing your business to reinventing the way you operate, we would want to hear those stories. At O'Brien Kimani is my Twitter handle, at KBC Channel 1, and of course at Kato Acheng. Let us get to know what has been your unique story, and who knows, you might end up having your story being read up here. Well, let's move on. And the advent of the pandemic has not been all doom and gloom, and few positives were realized from the pandemic, such as embracing technology, which has reduced the cost of doing business in the country. Corporates quickly reinvented themselves. There was a surge in use of telemedicine, remote working, online, as well as mobile money payment and e-learning. Jackie Wambiro takes a look at the light in the midst of the pandemic darkness.
As the COVID-19 pandemic rages on, business organizations and the society have been forced to readjust their mode of operandi due to reduced human interaction and physical transactions. The COVID-19 crisis catalyzed digital transformation as companies adapted. A majority of countries invested in smart city solutions, including telehealth as one of the developing health systems to diagnose, treat, carry out surgeries without the need of the physical presence of a medic. In Kenya, there was a surge in mobile money use as well as internet use for learning purposes and corporate webinars. the judiciary would embrace use of internet to carry out court proceedings. In China, security forces use drones attached with thermal sensors to isolate those with high temperatures from crowds. The telecom AHS designed a 5G-powered system to enable consultations and diagnosis. In Australia, the government launched a chatbot to keep the citizens up to date with the COVID-19 situation. In South Korea, the local government launched a smartphone app that would keep the self-quarantine employees in touch with their co-workers for work updates. Online learning would also increase to keep learners engaged. The pandemic also presented new opportunities to the IT industry that is projected to boom from $131 billion in 2020 to $295 billion in the next 5 years. This can be attributed to the increased demand for software and social media platforms such as Google Hangouts, WhatsApp Video Call, Zoom, WebEx, and MS Teams. These teleconferencing tools aided people in quarantine to stay in touch with their family members as well as have conference meetings.
Interesting there. Well, the World Wide Web has in the last 1 year provided some much needed entertainment and revenue for millions of users as the effects of lockdowns and restrictions continue to be felt. Social media has provided a global village where ideas have been put to practice for both the entertainment and educative purposes. And as Wanjiru Shega reports, the World Wide Web has been a blessing to some, while for others it has been a source of scrutiny and an ending controversy.
Ajib Mudhoni has for the last 1 year entertained her followers on the popular social media platform TikTok with her dance routine. Ajib is one among millions of Kenyans who have in the recent months leveraged on the social space to create a following and earn a living to mitigate the negative economic effects of the COVID-19 pandemic.
Artist and I release his new single and they want it because at the moment kama song inataka kutrend, it has to trend first on TikTok ndo iende kwa platforms zingine.
Ajib says it has taken consistency and commitment to convince brands and avid followers that anyone can earn a living from home.
Now they use influencers like us on TikTok. Yes, that's what they do. So they just contact me like, oh Ajib, there's this song, nataka unifanye challenge on TikTok. The giveaways are this, this, and this.
It's going the wrong way.
Should we jump?
Yes, meet me out.
Sheila Modoni is a comedian who has also learned to use social media as a tool to reach out to her audience.
I went to buy milk for the house. So why have you taken so long?
Just like Ajib, Sheila has leveraged on the World Wide Web at a time movement has been restricted in most parts of the world owing to the deadly surge in COVID-19 infections. According to a Global Web Index survey, July 2020 saw a rise of 10.5% in social media usage compared to July 2019. Many people say that they have spent more time on social media during the pandemic, making it the second most popular digital activity. In Kenya, a new group of artists have emerged in the last 1 year, providing some much-needed comic relief, inspiration, and spiritual nourishment. It has, however, not been rosy for everyone on the social space. Some content producers have found themselves at crossroads with the law over the content of their productions. On Thursday, comedian Eric Omondi was arrested following accusations that his content had contravened the law. Social media platforms such as Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube are also forced to block or suspend some users over the type of content they broadcast on the platforms. And as the world moves towards containing COVID-19, Ajib and Sheila hope that the lessons learned can translate into more revenue and entertainment for those whose lives have been forever changed by the pandemic. For Channel 1 News, I'm Wanjiru Shega.
Well, a continued comprehensive coverage of some of the stories touching on COVID-19 in the past 1 year, and we now want to look at what was happening in the sporting arena, where sporting activities across the world were brought to a halt in March 2020 following the outbreak of the coronavirus pandemic. It cast doubts on the futures of sportsmen and sportswomen after major local and international events were either cancelled or postponed. 1 year on, the unknowns of March 2020 are now known, and there has been a controlled return to play. Our reporter, Barclay Feather, takes us through the journey of the sports industry disrupted by the coronavirus pandemic for the past 12 months.
An unexpected coronavirus pandemic hit the world in the year 2020, forcing drastic measures to be taken by governments to protect their citizens. Sports was one of the major industries hit hard by the strict measures enforced to control the spread of the virus. All sporting activities in Kenya and the world as a whole were brought to a halt. Competitions ended prematurely, and in other cases, the formats of play had to be changed. The pandemic brought about the cancellation of major sporting events set for the year 2020, most events being pushed to 2021, including the Tokyo Olympic Games. Training sessions that involved gatherings reverted to individual training a few months later. And after months of research on the spread of the virus and how to contain it, then came a solution to ease the hunger of sportsmen and women. Return to play regulations allowed sporting events to resume, and slowly the games started, with non-contact sports being the first to get a nod. The return to play regulations included testing of players several times to ensure that no infected persons would enter the biosecure bubbles, with those who tested positive self-isolating. A year later, disciplines like handball and hockey are among those yet to restart. Through that period, there were so many negatives, but the positives were also evident. In that COVID-19 period, President Uhuru Kenyatta reopened the Nyayo National Stadium, which was under renovation, perhaps a sign of hope that sporting activities will get back to where they were. Then Kenyan athletes went ahead to break world records at different levels, including Kibiwot Kandie, who set a new world record for the half